Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another video. Supatease back here again, and this time we're going to be doing a full review of talents, honor talents, Azurite traits, and gear priority in 3v3 Arena for the balanced druid. So I'm just going to be going through everything basically and explaining my thoughts and what I think you should look to prioritize for setting up your balanced druid. So looking at the talents here on the first row, we've got Nature's Balance. I usually take this against basically everything. I enjoy starting the match with a Star Surge and the Boomkin Aura bonus to just immediately get your damage going. Warrior of the Loon is also a nice pick if you're playing with a rogue or a setup based composition. So during a crowd control attempt you can pop Warrior of the Loon and burst somebody down with 3 instant lunar strikes. Force of Nature is basically never taken in Arena at this point. They do not do enough damage to justify the cause, and in a lot of cases they will be kited and avoided. On the second tier, you can get a bit creative here with Tiger's Dash being a reduced cooldown sprint. You can use this build to kite against immobile melee, and that is a very short list. Most melee are not immobile, so if facing a team with an Arms Warrior, Enhancement Shaman, a Retribution Paladin, these melee classes are relatively immobile, and Tiger Dash will allow you to escape, but generally against these classes, Wild Charge will often be a better pick. Renewal is your cookie cutter. You can take this against everything if you don't really want to think about it, and Renewal is just a heal, and you would like to use it in bear form to maximize the amount of health that you get back from it. You typically use this when your healer is crowd controlled or when the enemy team is pressing offensive cooldowns. And then moving to Wild Charge, which I would say is the most creative talent in terms of changing your gameplay basically in the entire list. There are a lot of different ways to use it. You can use it on Z-axis maps to jump from the bottom up to the top to one of your partners while out of balanced druid form, or going in cat form to jump up and down aggressively. You can use the bear form to root somebody off of a partner and save them, or you can use the traditional Moonkin disengage or the travel form leap forward. There's a lot of cool and fun tricks that you can do with this, but right now with how many mobile melee there are, such as Windwalker and Demon Hunter, you typically can't take this because you will never be able to escape those classes, and it is better to just have the heal to power through the damage that they are ultimately going to get on you. Feral Affinity is a talent that you generally don't take. I have a very, 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 very niche moment where I do take Feral Affinity, and it is against Turbo Cleave or Mage Warrior in particular. These compositions, you normally cannot tank them in bear form. You will die through it unless you are moving, and this allows you to move significantly faster in travel form and escape the warriors and enhancement shamans quite effectively. I would not suggest that until you get very comfortable on balanced druid, and it's important that you will pair Feral Affinity with Typhoon as well as Wild Charge. With all of these low cooldown knockbacks and jump effects, you can kite warriors and enhancement shamans and rep paladins, but generally this is a very advanced tactic and should only be used once you've gotten more comfortable with balanced druid to sort of decipher when you need to run away or stay in the fight. And if you've been tuning into any of my guides, I do go through those moments, so definitely check them out. Then moving to Guardian Affinity, this is typically the cookie cutter talent that you can take in basically every single situation, especially if you're starting out. It gives you powerful abilities Iron Fur and Frenzied Regeneration. Again, you want to be going in bear form when the enemy team has got your healer in crowd control or they are popping offensive cooldowns. Then you will use Frenzied Regeneration after you've taken a ton of burst, and you should be spamming Mangle as much as you can to generate rage so you can activate Iron Fur against physical damage dealers. Then we move over onto Resto Affinity. Generally speaking, this is not better than Guardian Affinity because most comps can attack you at some point, and if they notice that you are running Restoration Affinity, not Guardian, they can exploit that immediately and take you down. I would only recommend this in some obscure cases if you're playing a balanced druid composition that is not that powerful, like with a warlock, where they have to basically target the warlock because they're so squishy. If you play with a class in that case where it's just such a high priority target that you know you'll never be targeted, you can get away with it and run Resto Affinity to get some extra healing. And you may even want to opt to try and run some Resto Druid Azerite traits. You can run Grove Tending, which is typically a Resto Druid trait, but works with the Restoration Affinity Swift Mend, which will give you an extra heal on that. So if you're playing with a very squishy partner like a Warlock and you want to try and just dampen the other team and drag it on as long as you can try to do that as a bit of an experiment. I have tried it as well. It works sometimes, it doesn't work others. And typically if the other team notices that you're running this, they'll switch to you and punish you immediately. So I would suggest for beginners especially to be running the Guardian Affinity. Then we move down to the 60th row, which is where you can get creative again. Bash is just obviously a melee ranged stun. You want to run this against healers like Resto Druids who are not susceptible to Mass Entanglement. Otherwise, you are typically running Mass Entanglement into most compositions. The only case that I would make is if you are facing Disciplined Priest, Survival Hunter, Feral Druid, or Retribution Paladin, Survival Hunter, Disciplined Priest. Compositions that have a freedom effect to remove roots with a Priest Healer who can be playing Gnome potentially will completely counteract your Mass Entanglement, so it will be just more beneficial to run Mighty Bash to slow down the damage or potentially deny their healer from moving in for crowd control chains. You can use Mighty Bash into Cyclone. Then with Typhoon, as I said, if you're going to be going for a kiting strategy, so you're facing a melee cleave with relatively immobile melee, you can pair Typhoon with Wild Charge, and this will allow you on a low cooldown to jump away from targets and knock them away from yourself. This is very effective on maps like Mugam Bala or Blade's Edge Arena, where you have a Z-axis to work with as well. And you can have a lot of fun with Wild Charge and Typhoon, but I would not suggest it until you get comfortable with it, and I would only suggest it on the maps where it is favorable to do it. These are maps with Z-axis effects. Moving on to the 75 row, we've got Soul Forest. Basically, if anything says Starfall on it, you don't take it. Starfall is not powerful in 3v3 arena whatsoever and should only be used to keep people in combat, pulling them out of stealth, denying their drinks. Any talent that has the word Starfall in it, you can basically pretend doesn't exist. Star-Lord, I've tried to be creative with, but at the moment, the way that Balanced Druid works is all of your damage comes from Star Surge. Your relevant damage that will kill a target comes from Star Surge. Your casted abilities, Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath, do not support running this to try and cast a lot of spells in the downtime. You want Incarnation for the increased duration so that you can get more Star Surges out with that increased amount of damage, and Star-Lord won't grant you that, which is why Incarnation of Chosen of the Elune is the go-to talent in basically every single situation. And you want to use this in conjunction with crowd control on the enemy healers. So Mass Entanglement, Solar Beam, Mighty Bash, Cyclone. During those moments, you'll then pop Incarnation, boost your damage. You should look to make sure you've got a full Astral Bar, so you can at least use 2 Star Surges right away at that critical moment of crowd control. And this talent is playing into where the strengths lie with Balanced Druid currently. Stellar Drift, it's got that word Starfall in it. We're going to move on. Twin Moons. This just gives you more Moonfire damage, and Moonfire at the moment is about 30% of your damage in every game, so buffing it by 20% and allowing you to apply it onto 2 targets so you can save some global cooldowns makes Twin Moves basically the go-to on this row. Stellar Flare, although now it has been changed quite a bit, it is still not potent enough. Because it has a cast time, you have to stand still, you risk being interrupted, and because it's on a School of Magic, that means all of your spells will be unusable if you get interrupted. It is not worth the risk towards the reward ratio. They did remove the Astral Power cost and then put a gain on it, which was beneficial, but the amount of risk that you take to use this ability isn't worth the trade-off of Twin Moves, where you gain damage and save global cooldown. So Twin Moons is your auto lock-in. Moving on to the 100 row, this is where you can be a little bit creative. I would say that with Shooting Stars, you're looking to have a very long sustained match where you're dotting multiple targets and doing rot pressure. So if you're playing with a Death Knight or a Demon Hunter or something, or a Warrior, this is usually very powerful. Fury of Elune, when paired with the Battlefield Focus Azerite trait, can be very potent because it will use a lot of the stacks rapidly, and you can use this when you play with a Mage or a Rogue. New Moon, Half Moon, Full Moon. While it is fun, Full Moon generally does less damage than Star Surge, with a drawback of having to cast for a long time and not be able to move during that cast period. So basically this is if you're feeling cheeky and you know that you may not be the target, you can run this, but efficiently speaking, you can run Shooting Stars in every composition against every composition. Fury of the Elune would be somewhat beneficial in Rogue Moonkin or Moonkin Mage when you've got crowd control chains and you need a lot of damage during a specific window of time. And then New Moon, Half Moon, Full Moon does the similar effect to Fury of the Elune, but with more drawback. Now, if we look over at the Honor talents, typically you're going to be running the Gladiator's Medallion. This will allow you to use Trinkets or use Gladiator's Medallion with Renewal together. So if you are stunned and your healer is crowd controlled, and the only way you will survive is if you Trinket into Renewal. You will also aggressively, if you'll be using the Gladiator's Medallion, will typically only use it during your Incarnation, as that is the most important time during your damage output to be attacking. So because it's a 2-minute cooldown, you can use it every time with Incarnation aggressively if you so choose. Generally, you are going to be using it defensively. Moonkin is much more about attritioning the enemy team at the moment and then finding specific burst windows for a kill. I wouldn't suggest it aggressively, but you can. Then moving down to the Honor talents, Celestial Guardian is basically an always pick. The 20% bonus healing that you receive and the 10% magic reduction is typically beneficial against everything in the game. There is only a very small amount of combinations of classes that do absolutely no magic damage. Something like a Fury Warrior Outlaw Rogue or a Windwalker Fury Warrior, this wouldn't be that efficient, but the 20% bonus healing applies to Renewal and it applies to Frenzied Regeneration. So you would want to be locking this in against basically everything. Then we move down to Cyclone, another auto lock-in. It's Cyclone. You don't really need to talk about it. It has great utility in both defense and offense for preventing the enemy from killing your team and to allow you to control the healer to deny them from saving their team. It's a definite auto lock. Then when we move down to the third one, it's where we can get a bit more creative. If you're running with multiple spellcasters, you're going to be looking for the Moonkin Aura, or if you know you may not be the target, this is generally a cookie cutter build you can go with. Celestial Guardian, Cyclone, and Moonkin Aura. If you're facing something like Turbo Cleave, you can run the Iron Feather Armor, or Jungle Cleave, you can run the Iron Feather Armor to get some bonus out of bear form while you're getting your dots reapplied and looking for Star Surge windows to reduce the damage. Then you can also get creative if you wanted to run Thorns against double melee classes as well, to just give you a little bit of brunt. If a Assassination Rogue is training you around the corner, Thorns yourself and force him to make a decision to attack into it and risk his life, or force him to run away from you. It can be very effective. The same is then true with Fairy Swarm, so when a rogue is running on you behind the pillar, or you combine this with Mass Entanglement, so you'll use Mass Entanglement on the healer and then use Fairy Swarm on the melee DPS class during that window so he can't dispel it. That gives you an 8-second period of time where their melee can't attack. It's this one where if you want to be a bit innovative in your own playstyle decisions, you can. I would say that Moon and Stars is no longer applicable. This has Starfall in it. We don't read it. Crescent Burn if you really wanted to be cheeky and get some extra damage on it, but it's generally not the best. Deep Roots is no longer applicable as it's now going to break on damage. Dying Stars is more of a rated battleground talent. Prickling Thorns is a bit too cumbersome to actually utilize properly. And then Protector of the Grove, it's not worth the value of the other talents that you can take and are available. But now we've looked through all of the talents, so I hope that we've been able to provide you with some useful information. We'll then go into the gear sets. There are a lot of different gear sets you can run with Balanced Druid right now. I would say that you typically want to focus on haste, versatility, and mastery, and you want to avoid critical strike as much as you can, and that obviously means on your sockets you're going to be putting haste gems on your sockets, haste on your weapon, and haste enchants on your ring. Here, because we're not all Mythic Raiders, we're probably not all going to be able to get the best in slot traits. If I were to put a best in slot list, you would likely want 2 Laser Matrix traits and a Battlefield Focus. I don't even have that. So, but maybe you guys can get it. If you wanted to go for that best in slot list, you could definitely try. Aside from that, I've got more of a realistic tier of traits because, again, you can't guarantee you're going to get them, so you kind of got to work with what you've got. So in this case, Archive of the Titans is a nice substitute. Anything with Intellect, Azerite Veins is going to be very potent. Another substitute is Sylvanas' Resolve and Azerite Fortification. These are both very powerful traits. You would like to stack them, so if I could prefer, I would have multiple Sylvanas Resolve with a Battlefield Focus, or multiple Archive of Titans with 1 Battlefield Focus. but you got to work with what you're given. Then on my helmet slot, I have never gotten a helmet that's given me an Azerite trait that does damage. So I selected this one because it has an interesting trait called Gory Regeneration, which is actually a Guardian Druid trait. And what you will do with this one is when you Frenzy Regeneration, you'll then press Mangle, and you will heal yourself for crazy numbers. And it's just a great one for survival. So I've got my helmet that helps my durability, basically. Then I've got a shoulder and a chest that's more focused on dealing damage, but stacking Resounding Protection is also valuable. I would say if you're not going to go for this to maximize your intellect gain for your sustained damage, you can run a battlefield focus build, which will let you just have battlefield focus. And this is very good if you're playing with a mage or a rogue, something with a lot of setup and a lot of burst, or ranged casters like Elemental Shaman, something along these lines. Battlefield Focus is just a good fit in most cases. It also opens up a lot of innovation in the match. If you see a Battlefield Focus proc on a target that you're not hitting at the moment, you can switch over with some Star Surges, gain the bonus damage, or Fury of the Elune, and get a huge amount of burst during that window of time. I would recommend Battlefield Focus, as most of you watching this probably focus more on the PvP side, and that is more likely to be attainable for you than something like Archive of the Titans or Laser Matrix. But if you, by all means, if you want to look for those and work for them and try and get them, then definitely do so. And now moving on to a little bit more of the innovative decisions. So you can run a Azerite trait called Craggy Bark, and it reduces melee attacks against you by a certain number. It depends on what item level your trait piece is. This is something you take as a niche against Turbo Cleave and or Jungle Cleave and or Retribution Paladin Survival Hunter. So the double melee cleaves, where you know you're going to be the target for an elongated period of time. This makes your bark skin almost as potent as an Earthen Wall totem, so it is extremely unlikely that you will go down. This is a trait that you can like work it in, you know, because when you're farming your Azerite traits, you're not guaranteed what ones you want, so you may run across this. And if you manage to get 3 of them and you're fighting a team that's giving you a hard time, they're just killing you over and over, and it's a melee cleave, then you can substitute in this trait to try and innovate your build a little bit to survive. Then we got the Lively Spirit Azerite trait build. This is the Azerite trait build that won BlizzCon with Samiam on his Balance Druid. It has been nerfed since then. It is a lot less effective, but like I said, you got to work with what you got, and if you happen to just get 3 Lively Spirits and that's the build that you've got to work with, then I'm just going to go over what you want to be doing with it. So you'll innervate, right? And your healer will spam out as many spells as he can, and then when the innervate ends, you'll get a boost of intellect. It's then during this time that you look to activate Incarnation with a Trinket or something along those lines, and pump out 2 Star Surges and try and kill someone in those 2 Star Surges. And that's generally your window. You're doing an all-in for your Incarnation, and it's important that your healer can set that up by getting as many spells off before the innervate ends to keep you going. So generally speaking, as far as trinkets go, a Balefire Grasp wouldn't be too bad. You're gonna have to run Mythic plus 10 keys to get that trinket. I would suggest running with the Gladiator's Medallion, and most of the time, since your relevant damage is coming from only Star Surge, you can actually run 2 on-use trinkets, and I will often do this. So I will pair 1 on-use trinket with my Incarnation, and then I will have the other one separately. So let's say in the opener I use a Mass Entanglement Solar Beam on the healer, and I use my Incarnation and my on-use. That's going to boost my damage. They're likely to trade cooldowns during that window and not die or retreat away. Having the second on-use trinket means that during my next Mass Entangle Solar Beam, I can give my Star Surges the next little oomph that they might need to actually push someone over the edge. And this is kind of my own decision making there to run that with the way that I see Boomkin playing out. I would recommend a double on use. Obviously, you got to work with what you got. If you've got a proc trinket, that's totally fine. You can run with an on use. You can switch in a Battle Master if you're playing something that you really just want to live and it's giving you a hard time, something like Jungle Cleave maybe. If it's just running you over and you really need some extra defense, then you can run with a Battle Master, or the infamous Zelzak's Veiled Eye from Mythic Uldir. But again, that's might not be as approachable of a trinket for you. So I'm trying to go through some realistic options as well as the potential best in slot if you happen to be the luckiest player in the world. So now we've reviewed what talents you need to get. We've looked through the Azerite traits that are available. We've gone through the stat priority, which again is haste, versatility, mastery, and then crit. And we've gone through some of the playstyles. So I think that pretty much covers everything that you need to know to get started on your balance druid. So I hope that you guys have fun blasting people in the face with star surges and have a good time. Again, I'm Supatease, and I'm coming out with this channel with guides every single day, so if you need to try and figure out something that might be giving you a hard time, eventually I think I'm going to have a guide for almost everything. So stay tuned, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Definitely leave your feedback and comments down below. I read them every single day. I do my best to try and target the guides towards what you guys are interested in and make sure that my content is relevant and useful to you. So thank you for watching once again, and I'll see you on the next one.